3D printer. And what we're going to look at is one of the most important things, which is called balance. So first we're going to fire this thing up. So what do we mean by balance? Well, when we 3D print an item, we need this down here, which is our nozzle. Let me go ahead and zoom that in. Down here is our nozzle. This right here is our print bed. Now, our nozzle needs to be as close as possible without impacting the print bed. Now, if it does that, you'll hear a clicking sound and nothing will come out, and then you run the possibility of clogging this. Now, if it's too far away, you run the chance of it just dropping down like noodles and not adhering properly. And adhesion is the number one thing we want to have when we 3D print. How does a print look when it doesn't adhere properly? You get something like this, see? Now, that's a little bit of residue left over from a different one, but see how it's kind of moving all over the place? You see all that? Now, this can be a different problem, but for this print, it didn't adhere properly, and you can kind of see right here, it looks a little funny too. So how do we get balance? Not every printer is the same, but I'm going to explain this with the Ender 3, which by the way is one of the least expensive printers. It's a $200 printer. I'm going to go here, and there's an option to prepare. I'm going to set it to auto home. Now, once here, what's next? Well, what I want to do is I want to see how far apart they are. Now, I can't move this. I'm going to go to the same spot. Prepare. And I'm going to disable steppers, which is the motors. Now, you saw that like slip a bit. They're the motors that control this. Now, I can move this around. You hear that scraping sound? I can tell you right now that that's already too close. So how do I adjust it? Well, some printers will come with the feeler gauge. It's a tiny little metallic tool that's 0.2 millimeters thick. Now, if you don't have that, you can always use the paper trick. And so I'm going to try to slip it underneath. You see that? And really what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the four corners. 1, 2, 3. Wow, that sounds really bad, huh? 4. So how do I adjust it? Now, so you have 4 knobs. Here's an example of one. You see the other one right here. So let me shine a little light so you can see. Now, there's 2 ways to rotate it, and it's going to sound weird, but right tightens the spring that's right there. If you can see that, there's a spring right here. Left will loosen it. So as it tightens, this bed will lower and move away from the nozzle. Left in this direction will lift it up. Now, if I can't get the paper in between the print bed and the nozzle, I'm going to go in this direction. And once it's in there and it slides really easily, I want to go in this direction. And this is all 4 corners. I want to do that till I feel this tightness. Now, if it rips the paper, it's too much, you're going to go in this direction. If it scratches like a line into the paper, you want to go in this direction. If it's sliding and you're not feeling any friction, you can just kind of like tell it's there. Well, then no, that's not enough. You're going to go in this direction. And I'm going to show you the paper fold method. It's kind of something that I use to figure out if I have enough friction and that these are close enough to each other. All right, so here's my paper. Let's get that right here. So you notice it doesn't slide underneath. I'm going to turn it quite a bit. Now it's there. You see I'm on the corner. I'm going to go in the opposite direction. See how easily it slides? You hear that friction. You notice there's no line here. So, see how easily it moves? That's way too loose. Now, what happens if it's too tight? See how I can't push it back? What I like to do is I like to fold the paper like this. That allows me to push it through. If I can't, this is way too tight, and you can kind of see that line. That's how you know it's way too tight. So I'm going to go back to the right, That's lowering the print bed. We're going to get that underneath again. And again, I made it way too tight, and then I'll just work my way back. If I can slide it back and forth with some friction, see now, it's a little too loose. See how I can fold it? And now, that still might be a little too much, and that's better. And I'm gonna move it over here. Now, as I adjust the four corners, what'll happen is, I have to come around a second time just to be sure any other adjustments affect the other corners, which can happen, okay? Okay, come over here, got way too tight. Let's go ahead and move this one down. Oh, give it a few turns. That should be good right there. Slide this over here. Way too loose. And that feels about right. And I'm gonna come back over here. See, now this is a little too loose. That's better. A little too loose. Okay, that feels good. That feels good. That feels good. And then you're good to go. And now what I would print out to test it is, I would go ahead and print out maybe a rectangle and just check the corners. If one side is lifting up, turn it to the left like this, okay? Now, if it looks paper thin or nothing's coming out or it's like a clicking sound, you're gonna go to the right. If it's lifting up at all, it's too loose and you're gonna go to the left. And that's how you balance a 3D printer. So today I'm going to show you a digital music tool. So I love STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, but there's an extra M there for music. And sometimes we have students that don't have access to either the instruments, maybe the school doesn't have a program, or where I live in this area, there's a lot of families that there's a lot of kids in one house. You know, there's a couple of kids that'll stay with their aunt and uncle, and then their cousins come and stay also. So there might not be any space there. So in order to combat that, what I like to do is introduce digital music. And so one of my favorite apps is beatbox.co. Now this will work on any device. You don't have to install it. You just go through Chrome. And it allows them to make digital music. But I like it because it kind of has this older 8-bit, 16-bit feel to it. So here it is. It's already playing. Let me go ahead and pause that. Now, here are all the controls. And when I want to lay down a track, I just click, and I'll hear a little bit of a, tone right there. Then I'll hit play. So you'll notice that it repeats the one. Now, the other reason I like this one is because it really allows students to understand, how do you make a song? How do you get all these beats? Well, when they say beats, really what they're talking about are the layers. So here's one layer, and then right here, I have several different sounds. Now, when I change it, it's already changed again, and I'll go to something a little more different than what you heard. So let's go even further down. Let's go to this one. So when I go to yellow, it has other sounds that I can pick, but I'll just use this one. Okay, so guess what? Here's my third layer. And then I'll just hit play. And finally, the fourth one are my drums. And that sounds weird, I know. But once I combine it with everything else, and so students have several options here. They can go ahead and just start playing around with the different sounds. Here you notice I have more synth sounds than guitars. Now if I go here, see I have dark choir. It's kind of down there. I'll go over here. Let me see if I can find dark wire here. So I'll head down here, and it's right there. So I can still, so I can have the same sound repeat if I want, but they're color coded just so they can understand, hey, there's 4 different layers, so you can have 4 different instruments. Now here, they can change the key. And so let me go ahead and show you how to start a new song. Because I want to show you, if I go here, just go all the way up to A. See how different it sounds? And actually, let me go ahead. Oh, you saw, if I click and I drag, it does that. But if I lift it, there is a way, there it is, for me to drag it and do that. And so as they start to mess with it, maybe you can drop a hint and say, hey, did you know if you drag it, it does this. Now go ahead and go down to F. So they get a lot of different sounds. So right here, they can play with a lot of different settings. I can change the tempo, or I can go as fast as possible. It really depends what they want to do. Now you're going to notice that here's 1. What happens if I change this to 2? What's blank? Guess what? So I'll go back to 1 so you can see this. And so it's going to play the 1. Let me slow it down a little bit. And now it goes back to 1 because it's set to 1. But guess what? If I change this to 2, it does that. So they can go all the way down to 8. So they have 8 different sets of music that they can create. And so here is where you'll have the kids start exploring. You show them the basics. So how do they save it? File, export song. They can pick a wave, MP3, MIDI, and so on. MP3, let me title it. And then I can just hit export and it'll ask me if I want to save it. There it is. Let me go ahead and stop that. And so, again, one last thing. If I want a song to be longer, I go ahead and just stretch this out, and then you can do this, and then I'll put a third one. Now, it's not going to play anything because there's nothing there, but if I go all the way back here, go ahead and hit pause. And every one of these layers can have their own set. I'll go ahead and put this one at 2. Now I'll put this one at 3. I'm just putting random notes. Oh, let me start from the beginning. And so this is a really great tool for students finish their work. Hey, put on your headphones. You can go ahead and make a song right now. And they start to experiment and getting these songs out of their head that they might be thinking about creating. And you might already have access to GarageBand. Great. Maybe you want another option, or maybe kids are like, okay, I've already played around with it, or maybe it's a little too much. Maybe they're intimidated by it. This is a great option for them. And so there you go. Here's a great music tool that's free and can be used on Chromebook, MacBooks, PCs, laptops, iPads, which is what I'm recording off of now, and so on. So today we're going to look at what I like to use when I'm introducing 3D design concepts to students. And I like to use it at the beginning of the year. It's Play-doh. Very simple, very easy to use, safe. Technically, you could eat it, but I always tell students don't. So Play-doh, how do we use it at the beginning of the year? Well, I know the first couple of weeks we want to set our norms and go over rules, but one of the first things I do is, this is my icebreaker right here. and it gets them thinking about 3D printing because I have my printers running in the back. By the way, I was a 5th and 6th grade classroom teacher, multiple subjects, so I had printers in my classroom, and I always treated it like a makerspace. But I mean, I went over every subject: English, math, science, history, you name it. But I always tried to use any piece of technology I can get my hands on, specifically 3D printing. So why this? Well, really it gets the kids thinking, and I like to start with 5 questions, okay? The first one, very easy. Go ahead and make me your favorite food. Now, while I talk about it, I'll go ahead and make a very bad example, which you'll see with some students. They're gonna go ahead and do this. And really it's a way to get to know your students, and also you start to understand who are the ones that are going to jump into this head first and who are the ones that are reluctant for whatever reason. Could be maybe they're not used to being given these open-ended questions and so on. So you might get one that says, hey, there's my hot dog. You want this. You want them to make this, very bad example of a hot dog, because then you can ask them, all right, well, where's the details? Or not because you want to embarrass them, but have them present. So let me take a step back. What I like to do is have students do this the first day, stand up, introduce themselves, and say, all right, let me see your favorite food. And I'll usually use my Apple TV with my iPad or some other way where I can walk around and go, all right, go ahead and stand up, go ahead and leave it there on the table, and tell me about it. And then I make sure to find good examples also with a lot of detail. And that really helps these kids understand, you know what? It's not a race. And it's not because they're being lazy or anything like that. It's just they might be nervous because they're like, okay, my thing's gonna look terrible. I've never sculpted something. So you want to show good and bad examples, but not really call them out on it. More than anything, show them, you know what? Hey, yours is pretty good. I'm gonna share it. They might say, oh no, don't. It's not that good. That's okay. Encourage them for the next one, which is the following day. So day 2 would be, what's your favorite hobby? Okay, well, they might go ahead and do this, and I'm gonna make a soccer ball and so on. When you're had a student, go ahead and make a little square, and they got a couple pieces like this, and then they made a controller out of it and so on, and basically they made a little Xbox. And again, it's to get to know the students, get them speaking. And the first day, call maybe 6-7 students. You're probably gonna have about 30 to 33 students. But the next day, you're gonna call different ones. And trust me, you're gonna have the same kids maybe wanting to offer up their creations and so on. So that's day 2. What's your favorite hobby? Now it's gonna start changing where it's a little more difficult for them. You might say, all right, make something that shows me your favorite subject or your least favorite subject. And they might go, okay, you know what? Maybe they love math. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and, do the functions. Let me go ahead and make my X, and then let me go ahead and make my division sign and so on. Here's my little division sign. And then as you're going towards later on in the week, as you're heading towards Friday, you want to go a little deeper. When they say, yeah, my favorite subject's math, you might have a follow-up question for that student that's presenting and say, why? Why is it your favorite subject? Who else in here has math as their favorite subject? Or even flip it and say, all right, who's afraid of math in here? And they might not really understand, what do you mean afraid? See, with kids, it's not that they hate the subject. They're afraid because maybe they don't have the understanding. Maybe there's a fundamental that they're missing. And now this gives you the opportunity to kind of pick up on that and say, hey, you know what? By doing this activity that's safe, it's an icebreaker, I get to know, all right, these are the kids that are worried already about their reading levels, their writing, public speaking, maybe English is their second language, and so on. Now, the 4th day, here's where it goes from here to, whoa, it starts to go way up there. The 5th day is the one that really gets them. But 4th day, I would tell them, hey, make something that represents somebody you respect. Could be your mom, your dad, aunt, uncle, cousin, best friend. I would try to make it someone that maybe is not famous. Now, they don't have a lot of family. You might have students that are in foster care system. They just moved in to the city. They're new to the school. They have no friends. They might not have any family nearby, and maybe they don't want to make something that represents mom or dad. Maybe they don't know them that well. It could be somebody famous, but I would try to avoid it, and I wouldn't promote it. If a student goes, you know what, I don't have somebody, try to kind of let them know, like, all right, you know what, go ahead and make something represent somebody else. And then from there, again, you know, off the top of your head, you're going to have other questions. Like, okay, so why that person? Okay? Or what is it about them that you respect? What's something you admire? Do you want to be more like them when you grow up? What are some things about yourself? Here's a good question. That you would want to change to be more like that person. How do you want to emulate? Okay? And you're going to use these words, and they're really going to start thinking like, okay, wait, who am I? And I mean, this was in 5th and 6th grade. You can use this same icebreaker in the lower grades, but you might want to change the questions a little bit. But I'd say 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, 11th, even up to, you know, seniors. They might have already done this with a different teacher or not, but I think it really works with any grade level, even if they've seen it before, because they could change from one summer to the, you know, over the summer from one year to the next. Now, the last one is make something that represents who you are as a person. Like, who are you? You know, who is Jesus Huerta? Who's Mr. Huerta? And usually what I'll do with the kids is I'll make something that's related to like a hobby that I like. I don't go with the typical, oh, here's an apple because I'm a teacher. Usually what I'll do is I'll make like a little arcade cabinet. I'm trying to make it right now on the spot. It's a little harder than I thought. And so I'll go ahead and mold this and kind of stretch it out. And the whole time, by the way, the whole week, I'm making my own copies too. I'm making my own, you know, food, who's somebody I respect. You know, right now I'm trying to make an arcade cabinet. It's not working out too well, but let me go and make the joysticks. And so you're going to have students that get frustrated. And that's an okay thing. That's a really big joystick. That doesn't work, does it? But it's okay. See, yours might come out terrible. But that's going to get the kids laughing. And guess what? They're going to feel comfortable. Then when you share what it is, they might go, oh, I see it. Or that's the worst thing I've ever seen. You know, that's not really an arcade cabinet, Mr. Huerta. Or that's not really spaghetti. Or whatever my favorite food is at that moment. And that's okay because we're building those relationships, but we're getting them to think, how do I turn this into that object? Each day, you'll see students start to add more and more details. And that's what we want, because once they go into CAD design, they're going to make something basic, but as they move forward, they're going to understand, okay, I understand the tools more, and now I'm making something better. Do that keychain project, but watch it and do it again in December, and then do it again at the end of the year, and let them run wild. Give them a little more freedom the second and third time, and watch what they do. Just like when you give them freedom with this and give them a prompt that really is wide open, they really will knock it out of the park. And so that's why I like to use Play-doh. Now you can use it now if you're watching this now, but I really love it for the beginning of the school year. And that's because it really lets me know my students, gets them thinking, and now guess what? The following week they're like, hey, are we going to use this again? No, we're going to go into something more digital. And then they start using something like Tinkercad or SolidWorks or Fusion 360, depending on what you have available. And they start designing 3D. But then I definitely revisit this, you know, maybe once a month. I pull it out one time. Hey, you know what? Let's do another Play-Doh design challenge. And guess what? They love it and they jump at it.